Good afternoon. I am here as a parent to explain why a strong social service sector is so important to families like mine. My son is autistic and has a global developmental delay, and we need the support of community services and funding to help us navigate the challenges that come with these diagnoses. When people hear that tens of thousands of families in Ontario are waiting for autism services, disability supports, and funding, it might sound like just another statistic, but for families like mine, it is our lived experience. Not being able to access the supports we need for our child when we need them is a constant source of frustration and a reminder of the inequities created when a social services sector is undervalued and underfunded. Some might hear the amount of funding that families receive and think that the government is being generous, but most don't realize how outrageously expensive autism therapies are and how thin we must stretch that funding to make it last. Not only that, but the delays in funding are so extreme that many children age out of the system before receiving anything. We waited 5 years from my son's autism diagnosis to finally be able to access funding for support such as behavioral therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. And waiting means watching your child grow older while they increasingly struggle without the support they need. It means uncertainty, stress, and constantly wondering whether your child will receive help in time to make a meaningful difference. Waiting also means that some families are forced to struggle to pay for therapies on their own because these are not elective therapies. They are essential to our children's ability to function in society, in school, and at home. Not supporting families like ours impacts our wider community. The cost of not supporting children and families when they need it means that children are not able to fulfill their potential and need extra support later on. They are unprepared to be in a mainstream classroom, but there are not enough spaces for them in special ed classrooms. Not supporting families like ours means that parents are overwhelmed and unable to work full-time or contribute in other meaningful ways to their communities. We take it for granted in Ontario that we don't have to pay out of pocket for a visit to the family doctor or emergency room. But for families with a child with a disability, therapies like speech therapy and physiotherapy are equally essential, yet we constantly have to fight and advocate for funding. My son has a diagnosed global developmental delay, including significant gross motor delays, and didn't take his first steps until he was 3.5 years old. Yet we were not able to access any publicly funded physiotherapy. This government's lack of proper investment in community and social services affects the very core of families' lives, our children. Supports that should be available and accessible are difficult to find, difficult to navigate, and often unavailable when we need them. The burden then falls on families. Parents are forced to become therapists, researchers, and advocates, all while trying to maintain employment and their own sanity. The reality is that navigating the system is a full-time job in itself. I spend countless hours researching programs, completing paperwork, following up on recommendations, joining wait lists, and advocating for services. The emotional toll of constantly fighting for support is exhausting. Families should be spending their energy enjoying their time with their children, not struggling to access services that already exist, but which are frustratingly out of reach. A well-funded and well-functioning system would deliver supports to children and families when they need them, not years later. We are constantly reminded that early intervention is key, yet we were on a wait list for 5 years to access funding for supports. A well-funded social sector means families don't have to navigate and research on their own to seek out services and therapies that they need. It also means that social service workers have manageable caseloads, fair pay, and the resources necessary to help families effectively and efficiently. Families like mine cannot continue to struggle to access essential services for our children and still contribute meaningfully to society. The care navigators in our community who support children and families are helping children reach their potential and are preventing crises by providing access to supports like behavior therapy and parental respite when they are needed, or ideally proactively. When these workers are undervalued and underpaid, families like ours and children like my son pay the price. Social services are worth fighting for.